Let's revisit our top story, Typhoon Haiyan's destructive path through the Philippines and China. Joining me now to talk about how countries decide on donations following a natural disaster is Professor Jia Xiudong from the China Institute of International Studies. Professor, first of all, I'd like to highlight kind of the differences in how the aid question is being viewed. Some Western media reports say that China's aid to the Philippines is too small when compared with the U.S. and other countries. But we're seeing a different viewpoint emerging in China, and we're going to start with a survey from Phoenix TV's website. People were asked, what do you think of Western media reports on China's donations to the Philippines? Just over 48% of the people think the Western media is trying to damage China's foreign policy. Just over 45% think that the Western media is trying to worsen the disputes in the South China Sea. Now, when asked what's your impression of the Philippine government's disaster rescue and relief efforts, 72% of the respondents think that the government is not doing a good job and that their president is powerless. And finally, to the question, what's your view of China's aid to the Philippines? Just over 60% believe that China should consider the Philippines' policy towards China before sending money. More than 170,000 people have weighed in as part of this online survey so far. So, Professor, what's your take on all of this? And let's start with the last point, if we can. A country's policy, should it be influenced by humanitarian action?
Well, certainly when countries consider donations to countries that suffer from natural disasters, they will consider charity need, humanitarian need. Also, they'll take into the consideration of the political relations between the countries. And for China, China is both a frequent donator and a frequent recipient of disaster relief in time of natural disasters. And for China, from day one, that China announced its first aid to the Philippines. It has said that China will consider providing more assistance in accordance with the conditions there and the need of the disaster-stricken areas. So, and actually for China and for other countries, including the United States, they will consider both the humanitarian need and also the political relation. For example, the U.S. aid to the Philippines is by $20 million, is more than 40 times of that provided by the United States to China in the Wenchuan earthquake in 2008. And also, China's provided aid to the United States in 2005 during the Hurricane Katrina disaster. China's aid was $5 million. That's more than 10 times of what the United States provided to China's Wenchuan earthquake. And so I think that the Western media's coverage of China's current aid to the Philippines is kind of not objective, and it's not fair. Already this kind of coverage or reporting on China's aid has aroused resentment among many Chinese, and it reminded many Chinese of Western media's portrait of China back in 2008
Professor
during
Jia,
the Olympic Games.
Professor Jia, if I could just ask you one more quick question, and if you could be brief in your response. I just want you to provide some context. I mean, China is also dealing with the remnants of this typhoon, the damage there in China. I look back, April, China ravaged with an earthquake. In August, 2 typhoons slammed into China, millions displaced. China's had its hands full this year, and I don't think people are providing that kind of context either.
Well, yes, China actually suffered from typhoons many times a year, and millions of, even tens of millions of people were displaced. And China fought with disasters. Actually, China has the expertise and would also like to help other countries, even though it is itself is suffering from the disasters. And for example, last month, China provided $800,000 US dollars to the Philippines for the earthquake. And back in 2011, China provided $1 million US dollars of aid to the Philippines during also a disaster, a kind of typhoon disaster. However, whereas the United States provided $100,000 US dollars to the Philippines during a flood last year.
All right, Professor Jia, thank you so much for your analysis. Appreciate it.